The stars stretched out like an endless sea before me, calm and cold. My name is Dorian Cade, and I am a pilot. My life had always been about the quiet hum of the engines, the distant reaches of the galaxy, and the cold, calculated nature of my work. I was no hero, no savior, just a man with a job to do. But that was about to change. The day started like any other. The usual cargo run, a routine haul from Sultan 7, an abandoned colony world no one cared to visit anymore. The comms were silent, the ship the Horizon gliding through the asteroid field with a smoothness that suggested nothing could disrupt the calm of the cosmos. The mission was simple: transport goods to the next system. Nothing unusual. But then, the signal came through. It was faint at first, the static cutting in and out, barely audible. The frequency was unfamiliar, but something about the desperation in the voice compelled me to listen. "Help! Our planet is dying! We need refuge!" The words were breathless, cut off abruptly, as if the speaker was running out of time. I couldn't ignore it. I punched in the coordinates, following the weak signal as it led me further into the depths of space. The voice came from a forgotten system, from a planet that had slipped through the cracks of galactic maps, a place known as Sunder. When I finally arrived, I didn't know what to expect. I was prepared for anything but what I found. My boots hit the cracked surface of the barren planet, and as I stepped off the ramp, I saw her. A woman, tall, with striking violet skin that shimmered under the dying light of the sun. She stood amidst the ruins of what had once been a thriving city, her eyes fierce yet filled with the weight of loss. In her arms, she held a small child, a girl no older than 5, her hair tangled in the winds of this dying world. The woman turned to face me, her expression unreadable but resolute. "You've come for us," she said, her voice steady but thick with grief. "Our people are gone. The last of us must escape the destruction of Sunder." I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. It was like time had frozen. The weight of the planet's decay hung heavy in the air, the sky burning with fiery orange as molten debris drifted through the atmosphere. The woman stepped forward, and with a look of finality, she continued, "We have no one else. You saved us. By our law, you must take us both." I had no idea what she meant, but her words echoed in my mind as I realized that nothing about my life would ever be the same again. The woman's name was Lyra, and the child in her arms was Nara, her daughter. I had never seen anything like them. Their features delicate, their skin a beautiful shade of violet, and their eyes bright with an ancient, unspoken wisdom. They were different, like beings carved from the stars themselves. Yet, beneath the beauty of their appearance lay a sorrow so deep it was almost palpable. We walked toward my ship, the Horizon, the distant hum of the engines offering a small comfort in the midst of this desolate world. As I guided them inside, Lyra's expression shifted. She looked out the viewport, watching the fires of her planet burn in silence, before finally speaking again. "You must know why you are here," she began, her voice calm but laden with an undercurrent of urgency. "The law of my people, the Sundarians, binds us to those who save us. By tradition, when we are saved, we owe our lives to the one who does so. And in return, they must take us with them, protect us, care for us." I didn't fully understand. I had rescued them. Yes, but I was no hero, just a man trying to do the right thing. I wasn't prepared for what came next. Lyra's gaze turned serious, her face softening only slightly as she spoke again. "By the law of the Sundarians, you are bound to us now. You saved Nara, and in doing so, you must take us both. You cannot leave us behind, Dorian. To do so would be a violation of our sacred law." I swallowed hard, trying to process her words. What was she saying? Was this some sort of cultural formality? But I could see it in her eyes. She was not speaking. Metaphorically, she was serious. Where would we go? I asked, my mind racing. This planet is dying. There's nowhere left for you. There are places, worlds beyond the reach of those who would seek to destroy us, she replied. We must find refuge in a distant system, far from the warlords and those who would see our people eradicated. I nodded, my mind still struggling to catch up with the gravity of the situation. I was no stranger to refugees, to the lost and the displaced. But this was something else entirely. It was a law, a bond that could not be broken. But what choice did I have? I was now part of their world, for better or for worse. The commitment was made. The law of the Sundarians was binding. As I stared at the stars outside the viewport, I realized that this was no longer just a mission. It was my responsibility to protect these two souls who had no place left to call home. The weight of the promise hung heavy on my shoulders. I turned to Lyra, who had already begun to prepare for the journey ahead. She was calm, composed, a stark contrast to the chaotic storm that raged within me. Her strength was evident, even in her grief. And as for Nara, she looked up at me with innocent eyes that seemed to hold a quiet trust, as though she already knew what I had yet to fully accept. There was no turning back now. The journey to find a new home for Lyra and Nara felt like a passage through time itself. We drifted through the quiet of space, the horizon gliding silently through the dark expanse, the hum of the engines our only companion. Every day, the sky outside the ship shifted from the eerie red glow of Sunder's dying sun to the inky black of deep space. Yet, despite the vast emptiness around us, I felt anything but alone. Lyra had become a silent presence beside me. She was calm, focused, and with each passing day, I learned more about her people. The Sundarians. They had been a peaceful race for millennia, masters of technology and harmony, their planet a jewel in the galaxy until the sun's instability had turned their world to ashes. Now, they were the last of their kind, their future uncertain, their survival hinging on the very law that now bound us together. Nara, her daughter, remained a quiet observer of it all. At night, she would curl up in a corner, her small form wrapped in the blanket I had given her, looking out at the stars with a wistfulness far beyond her years. There was an innocence to her, yet a deep, silent understanding of the loss they had endured. I'd never been a father, never had a family of my own. But something about Nara's gaze made me feel protective, as if I could shield her from the overwhelming sadness that gripped her world. It wasn't much, but it was all I could offer. Days bled into weeks as we searched for a place to call home. We passed by uninhabited moons, dead planets, systems choked by war. Every location seemed to bring us closer to a bitter truth. There was no safe place left for them. The galaxy had become a battlefield, a place where the strong preyed upon. The weak and the Sundarians, with their peaceful nature, had no place to hide. It wasn't until we reached the edge of the nebula cluster that we found something promising. The system was largely uncharted, surrounded by dense asteroid fields and a dying star, perfect for avoiding detection. But when I entered the system's outer rim, I found more than just empty space. I found a planet, forgotten by the rest of the universe. The planet was called Iridia, its surface covered with vast oceans and forests, the air thick with the scent of rain and earth. It was an uninhabited world, a place that no empire had claimed, and it was here that we would seek refuge. I landed the horizon on the shore of a great lake, its waters shimmering like glass beneath the light of the dying sun. The planet felt like an untouched paradise, an oasis in the middle of nothingness. The calm of the world was almost too much to bear after the chaos of Sundar. But I could see the weight lift off Lyra's shoulders as she stepped out of the ship, her eyes scanning the horizon with a hope I hadn't seen since we first met. "This is where we begin again," Lyra said, her voice thick with emotion. "This world will be our home, Dorian, our sanctuary." I didn't know if she truly believed that. I didn't know if anyone could find peace after losing everything they had known. But in that moment, I realized something profound. The law of the Sundarians wasn't just about survival. It was about hope. It was about finding a way to live again, despite the odds, despite the overwhelming loss. And for the first time since the disaster on Sundar, I felt a spark of something other than despair, a glimmer of possibility. Nara ran toward the water, her laughter like music, her joy a brief respite from the heaviness that had settled over us all. Lyra watched her, her expression softening, as she saw her daughter free from the shadows of their past. For the first time, there was a sense of relief. We had made it. We had found a place where they could begin again. But deep down, I knew that the journey wasn't over. There was more to their law, more to this bond between us that I had yet to fully understand. But for now, the stars above us felt a little brighter, and the silence of the planet felt a little less lonely. We were home, at least for a moment. The days on Iridia were peaceful, deceptively so. For weeks, we lived in the relative safety of the planet's untouched beauty. I set up a modest shelter near the lake's edge, where the air was fresh and the wildlife in the surrounding forests seemed undisturbed by the presence of outsiders. Lyra and Nara found solace in the rhythm of their new life, hunting, gathering, and slowly building a home from the very land that had once seemed so foreign to them. I thought we were safe. I thought we could rest. That perhaps, just perhaps, we could start over here. But the serenity of Iridia was an illusion, a fragile facade that quickly began to crack. It was during one of the quiet nights, as we sat around a campfire under the twinkling stars, that Lyra's demeanor changed. She had been distant for days, her eyes clouded with thoughts I couldn't begin to understand. That night, she finally spoke. And with it, she revealed something I hadn't expected. "Dorian," she began, her voice steady but tinged with something I couldn't quite place. "There's something you don't know about our law." I glanced up from the fire, my gaze meeting hers. I had learned much about the Sundarians, but I had never understood the full weight of the law that bound us together. I knew it was serious, that it was sacred to them, but I had assumed it was simply a tradition, a formality. "The law," she continued, her eyes darkening, "it requires more than just saving our lives. It requires a bond, a permanent one." I felt a chill run down my spine. "A bond?" I repeated, unsure of what she meant. Lyra looked away for a moment, her gaze lingering on the flickering flames. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "By saving Nara, you have become part of our family. You are bound to us now. And once that bond is formed, it cannot be undone." I blinked, struggling to process her words. "What are you saying, Lyra?" She turned back to me, her face taut with a quiet urgency. "I didn't tell you everything before. I should have, but I couldn't. I didn't want you to think I was trapping you." "Trapping me?" The words felt strange, coming from her. I had never once thought of her as deceitful, but now doubt began to creep in. "The bond, Dorian," she said, her voice low and firm. "It's more than just an obligation. It's a part of our people's survival. You are not free to leave us, no matter where you go, no matter how far you try to run. The law of the Sundarians binds you to us, and if you try to break it, there will be consequences." The weight of her words hit me like a physical blow. I had been running away from a life of responsibilities for years, never allowing myself to be tied down. Now, I realized, I was bound, not just by law, but by a promise I never truly understood. For the first time, I felt the full force of the gravity of my decision. I hadn't just saved them from a dying planet. I had signed my own fate in the process. I stood up, pacing around the fire, my mind racing. You should have told me this from the beginning. You should have warned me about the consequences. Lyra's expression softened, but there was a hardness to her eyes. I wanted to, but you didn't need to know, not until now. You were too important. To risk losing Dorian. Nara, she has no one else. I had to protect her. I ran my hand through my hair, trying to find some clarity, but everything felt so tangled, so out of control. I didn't sign up for this, I muttered. Lyra stood and walked over to me, her footsteps soft on the ground. I never asked you to, but the law doesn't care about your desires. It only cares about survival. I turned to face her, frustration boiling within me. You've taken my freedom away without even telling me. You've kept me in the dark, forced me into a bond I didn't choose. I didn't want to trap you, she said, her voice strained. I wanted you to have a choice. But there is no choice now. You saved us, Dorian, and now we must stay together, or we risk losing everything. The silence between us stretched out, filled only by the crackling of the fire. I could feel the walls closing in on me, the weight of this unforeseen responsibility crushing me from all sides. It wasn't just about helping them anymore. It was about keeping a promise to a people whose laws I barely understood, a promise that was now a prison of my own making. My life was no longer my own. I had been betrayed, not by Lyra, but by the very law I had unknowingly entered into, and now I would pay the price. The days following the revelation felt like I was living in a different universe, one where my actions no longer belonged to me. The weight of the Sundarian law pressed down on me, unyielding and inescapable. Lyra and Nara were kind, patient, but I could see the quiet anxiety in their eyes, as if they too understood the gravity of the situation. They had been survivors all their lives, but now they weren't just surviving. They were living in the shadow of an ancient and unbreakable law, one that had now bound us all together. I spent hours in the cockpit of the Horizon, staring out into the vast, empty expanse of space, trying to clear my mind, trying to find some way out of the mess I had unwittingly walked into. But no matter how many times I ran the numbers, no matter how many different routes I considered, there was no escape. Lyra and Nara were my responsibility now. The law had bound me to them, and whether I liked it or not, that bond couldn't be severed. It wasn't just a matter of survival for them anymore. It was a matter of their future, of my future, and of something deeper, something I had yet to understand. I had thought I was rescuing them, saving them from a dying planet. But now, I realized that it wasn't just their lives I had altered. I had changed mine as well, in ways I hadn't been prepared for. In the weeks that followed, I kept my distance, unsure of how to navigate this new life. The three of us lived in silence, the unspoken tension between us palpable. The bond had created an invisible wall, one that I couldn't cross, one that I didn't know how to tear down. Lyra, despite her calm demeanor, seemed to carry the weight of the law even more heavily than I did. She was trapped by it, just as I was. And Nara, sweet Nara, remained caught between the two of us, her innocent eyes seeing more than any child should. Then, one day, as I stood by the lake, gazing out at the still waters, Lyra approached me. She didn't say anything at first. She simply stood next to me, her presence a quiet reminder that I wasn't alone in this. I didn't want this for you, she said softly, breaking the silence between us. I didn't want to bring you into this, but you saved Nara and the law. She trailed off, as if the words themselves were too heavy to carry. I didn't turn to look at her. I didn't choose this, Lyra. You didn't tell me the truth. You kept me in the dark. I know, she said quietly. I should have. I didn't want you to feel trapped. I thought you would leave, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing Nara. We have nothing left. No family. No home. Her words struck something deep within me, something I had been trying to ignore. The truth was, I understood. I understood the desperation, the fear of being alone in a universe that had turned its back on them. I didn't know what it was like to lose everything, but I could see it in her eyes. And somehow, I knew that if I left now, if I walked away, they would have nothing. The silence stretched between us, the weight of the unspoken truth thick in the air. The bond was real. There was no denying it anymore. I'm not going to leave you, I said finally, my voice low but steady. But I need to understand what this means. I need to know what's at stake. Lyra nodded, as though she had been waiting for me to come to this realization. The bond is not just a law. It's a connection that runs deeper than anything you've experienced. It ties us together, Dorian. Forever. I turned to face her, my heart pounding. Forever? Forever, she confirmed. The bond is unbreakable. If you try to break it, it will destroy you both. It's a part of our survival, a part of our fate. I felt the weight of her words like a boulder on my chest. I wasn't just trapped by the law. I was bound by fate. There was no way out of this. I looked down at the ground, the reality of it all settling in. There was no escape. There was no running. I had made my choice when I had saved Nara, and now there was no turning back. But in that moment, as I stared at the lake's surface, I realized something else. I wasn't alone in this anymore. Lyra and Nara were my responsibility, yes, but they were also my family, whether I had chosen them or not. The bond had been forged, and it would take everything. I had to protect them, and maybe, just maybe, that was the greatest responsibility I could ever have. The peace we had found on Iridia was short-lived. In the weeks following my acceptance of the bond, life began to take on a strange rhythm, one where the familiar became suffocating, and the uncertainty of our future crept in like a shadow. I had learned to adapt, to exist within the boundaries set by the Sundarian law, but there was still so much I didn't understand. The weight of the bond wasn't just a physical presence, but an emotional one as well. Every decision I made, every step I took, seemed to ripple out and affect both Lyra and Nara, and the choices I had made no longer felt like my own. It felt as though the universe itself had a hand in shaping my path. But my moment of peace, as fleeting as it was shattered one night. I had been out by the lake, watching the reflection of the stars dance across the surface, when I heard a distant sound, a low rumble, followed by a sharp, echoing crack. I didn't immediately understand what it was, but my instincts kicked in. Something was wrong. I rushed back to the camp, only to find Lyra and Nara standing in the distance, their gazes fixed on the sky. The horizon was alight with streaks of fire, and I knew at once that it was no natural event. Something was coming. "They've found us," Lyra said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. I had never seen her this way, not even when we had first fled Sunder. The look in her eyes was a mixture of dread and resignation, as though she had been expecting this moment all along. "Who?" I asked, stepping closer to her. "The warlords," she said, the words heavy with an ancient bitterness. "The ones who destroyed our people. They hunt us, Dorian. They will never stop until we are eradicated." I felt a chill run down my spine. "I thought we were safe here," I muttered. "This planet, this world. It was supposed to be our refuge." "Refuge," Lyra repeated bitterly. "No place is ever truly safe, Dorian. Not for us. Not for anyone. Who is different? They will track us to the ends of the galaxy, and they will not rest until they have wiped us out completely. I could see the fear in her eyes, but there was something else too. Determination. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about fighting back. And it was clear that the time for hiding was over. Suddenly, the ground shook, and I staggered, struggling to keep my balance. The sky above us rippled with the explosion of a distant blast, and a low, menacing hum echoed through the atmosphere. The warlords had arrived, and they weren't coming alone. "We need to leave now," I said, my voice urgent. Lyra shook her head, her eyes locked on the fiery horizon. "We can't run anymore. We need to face them." I was taken aback by her words. "Face them? How? We're no match for them. We have nothing left." "We have something more," she said, her voice firm. "We have the law of the Sunderians. We have the bond that ties us together." Her words didn't make sense at first, but then it hit me. The law, the bond. It wasn't just a means of survival. It was a weapon. A weapon that could be used to fight back, to defend not just herself, but Nara and me as well. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. I turned to face Nara, who was standing a few paces away, her small figure barely visible in the dim light. She was watching us with wide, innocent eyes, oblivious to the imminent danger. And then, something unexpected happened. As I looked at her, I saw a flicker of something inside her, a spark of power, something I hadn't noticed before. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. I turned back to Lyra. "What's happening to her?" "What is that?" Lyra's face darkened. "Nara, she is the key. She is the last of our bloodline, the heir to the Sunderian legacy. She has the power to save us, or destroy us. She is the only one who can end the warlord's reign." I felt the weight of her words settle in my chest. "But she's just a child." "She is more than that," Lyra said, her voice hardening. "The bond. It is not just a connection between us. It is a link to our power, to our past. And Nara has inherited it all, but she doesn't yet understand what she's capable of." The realization hit me like a shockwave. Nara wasn't just a child caught in the crossfire. She was the future of her people. And with that future came a responsibility far beyond anything I had imagined. I looked back at the horizon, where the warlord ships were beginning to land, their black forms silhouetted against the burning sky. The time for running was over. We had no choice now but to fight. And fight we would, together. The battle for Iridia had begun. The warlord ships descended from the sky, their massive forms blotting out the stars. Their engines roared as they cut through the atmosphere, casting an ominous shadow over the planet. The ground shook with each new arrival, and the distant thrum of their weapons resonated deep within my chest. The odds were overwhelming. There were hundreds, perhaps thousands of them, each a hardened soldier in a war that had waged for centuries. But we were not alone. The bond that tied Lyra, Nara, and me together was stronger than I had ever imagined. The power of the Sunderians, the ancient, untapped potential that Nara carried within her, began to stir. It was a force beyond comprehension, a force that could change the fate of an entire species. And Nara, despite her young age, was the key. The night was alive with the glow of battle. We had fortified our position by the lake, using the dense forests for cover and the natural terrain to our advantage. But it was clear that this was not a fight we could win with force alone. We needed something more. We needed the full power of the Sunderians. I stood with Lyra, watching as the warlord forces began to spread out across the landscape. "What now?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the din of the impending conflict. "We wait," Lyra said, her expression set in stone. "We need to give Nara the time she needs." But time was something we didn't have. The warlords were relentless, and they were closing in fast. I could feel their presence, their hatred in the air. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to destroy. Nara stood apart from us, her small figure silhouetted against the flickering lights of the enemy ships. Her eyes were closed, her hands held out in front of her as if she were drawing power from the very planet itself. I could feel the hum in the air, the energy radiating from her, growing stronger by the second. "It's working," Lyra whispered. "She's unlocking the power of the bond. She's becoming what we always knew she would be." I turned to Lyra. "What exactly is she doing?" "She's calling upon the power of our people," Lyra explained, her voice filled with awe. "The Sundarians had the ability to connect with the energy of the universe, to manipulate it, bend it to their will. And Nara, she is the last living heir. The power within her is more than just a survival mechanism, it's a weapon." The ground beneath our feet trembled as Nara's eyes snapped open, glowing with an otherworldly light. The air crackled with energy, and I felt it, the sheer force of it, pouring out from her like a tidal wave. It was as if the very earth itself was coming alive in response to her call. Then, without warning, Nara raised her arms. The sky above us lit up with blinding light, and the warlord ships began to tremble, their engines sputtering as if something was interfering with their systems. And that's when I saw it, the crackling energy shooting through the air, swirling around Nara like a vortex of power. "Dorian!" Lyra shouted, her eyes wide with panic. "We need to protect her. The warlords will come for her first. They won't let this happen." I rushed to Nara's side, pulling her close as the energy around us intensified. I could feel the power surging, overwhelming. But I also felt something else. Something I hadn't expected. There was a connection, a bond between us, between me and Nara, that was deeper than the one forged by the Sundarian law. I had become her protector, her guardian, and in this moment, I was more than just a man caught in a cosmic trap. I was part of something greater. The warlord forces didn't stand a chance. Nara's power exploded outward in a dazzling burst of light, sending shockwaves through the enemy ranks. Ships were torn apart mid-air, crashing to the ground in fiery explosions. The very ground beneath us buckled as if the planet itself was fighting back. But even as the warlords faltered, their commanders issued a final, desperate command. The sky above us darkened as the last wave of ships descended, unleashing their most devastating weapon. A massive energy cannon aimed directly at Nara. Lyra and I lunged forward, trying to shield her, but it was too late. The weapon fired. In that instant, time seemed to slow. The blast from the cannon enveloped Nara, the light so bright it was blinding. My heart stopped as I watched her, powerless to stop what was coming. But then, something miraculous happened. Nara's body glowed with a blinding light, her hands raised as if in defiance of the weapon aimed at her, and then, with a single pulse of energy, the weapon was neutralized. The energy blast was absorbed by her, twisted and redirected back at the warlord ships. The explosion that followed was deafening, the force of it shaking the very ground beneath us. The warlord forces were obliterated in an instant. As the smoke cleared, I saw Nara, standing tall and proud, her body surrounded by a halo of energy. She was no longer just a child. She was a force of nature, a living embodiment of her people's power. Lyra, her face a mix of awe and relief, stepped forward. She did it. She's the one who will lead us. She's the one who will restore our people. I looked at Nara, the girl who had once been so small and vulnerable. But now I saw something else. A leader. A queen. And in that moment, I understood the true meaning of the bond we shared. It wasn't just a law, a contract. It was a destiny. Our fates were intertwined, and together, we had just defeated the darkness that threatened to consume us. As I looked out at the horizon, now free from the shadow of the warlords, I knew that this was only the beginning. Nara's journey, our journey, was far from over, but together we would face whatever came next, as a family, bound by a law older than time itself, and this time we would make our own fate.